The Michigan Man Podcast, episode 207. Michigan basketball riding high after the recent NBA draft, and it's just under 4 weeks until Team 135 gathers for the start of fall practice. Editor John Borton from the Wolverine Magazine is this week's guest. Stay tuned. This is the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. It might be the lazy, hazy days of summer for most of us, but for Michigan football and basketball players, it's back to work and back to class time for many of them. Coach John Beilein's basketball team has welcomed 6 freshmen to campus, and in a couple of weeks, they'll start practice in preparation for their 2-week trip to Italy. To say it's a rebuilding year for Michigan basketball is putting it mildly. Coach B has a lot of work to do in putting the pieces together for this year's team, but it sounds like he's excited to start assembling this talented but young group. We all know the official start of fall practice for football is just weeks away. But since June 21st, most of the team has been on campus working out, running 7-on-7 drills, and getting ahead in the classroom. We don't hear much about what takes place in these workouts during this time of year, but Coach Brady Hoke says they are important days for a lot of reasons. Leadership is often formed during summer workouts, quarterbacks and receivers have a chance to get in sync, and younger players get their first taste of what it takes to excel at this level of college football. We all hope it pays dividends this fall. On today's Michigan Game Day segment, the topic is Michigan football and basketball, as we just mentioned. My guest is the editor of the Wolverine Magazine, John Borton. That's next here on the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. With us on our Michigan Game Day segment here for this first show of July is the editor of the Wolverine Magazine, John Borton. John, great to have you back with us.
Oh, it's good to be with you. Always great to talk Michigan sports, and I know it's a little bit of a downtime, we think, but it's everything's not far away, as we've already discussed.
Well, as we've already discussed, you're right. It's maybe a downtime for Michigan fans as we enjoy some summer, especially after this past winter, but not a slow time for you folks at the Wolverine as we're all anxiously waiting for our football preview to come out, which is, as you said, you just wrapped up. Should be out pretty soon, shouldn't it?
It is on the way. I think some of the digital editions are already out. It's going out in the mail. People will have it in their hands very soon. 270 pages, full color. Just they love to get this one because it goes beyond what you might see in a 2-page Michigan description in a national publication. We're talking 270 pages focused on Michigan football with the input of all the coaches sitting down with Brady Hoke and all the assistants and players, and it's pretty thorough.
And I will have your 800 number up on the show notes section of the podcast for folks to call. I always tell listeners, if you're not a subscriber to the Wolverine, the preview issue alone is worth the price. So we're anxiously waiting to see that. I thought I'd talk to John today about football and basketball. It's that time of the year from a fan perspective where we're sort of just waiting for football practice to kick off. Because of the success of the basketball program during the last 2 years, we still have a lot of basketball to talk about. So let's talk about the draft for just a minute, John. Nick Stauskas, Mitch McGarry go in the first round, Glenn Robinson the third. In the second, Jordan Morgan is getting his chance with the Timberwolves. Coach Beilein has just developed a basketball factory in Ann Arbor now, hasn't he?
Well, it's pretty amazing. I don't think anybody would have guessed that you'd be talking about five early entries in 2 years, and you think back, it just hasn't been that long since this bunch was playing in the national championship game, and now you've got a handful of those key players playing in the NBA or about to, and it is amazing what they have done. And this is the coaching staff. They recently re-upped the assistant coaches, and they're a big part of this too. But John Beilein has been everything and beyond what could have been imagined when he was brought to Ann Arbor. I'll tell you what, when he came to Michigan, we talked to people in the business, and we talked to coaches, and we listened to what people like Bob Knight said about John Beilein, and like Rick Pitino, what he had to say, and over and over again, he said this is going to be a really dynamic combination because you've got somebody with just a basketball genius like John Beilein, and you're combining that with the power of Michigan. In other words, the power to go beyond what Canisius could ever hope in recruiting, or even West Virginia. And we're starting to see that come to pass here in the last 2, 3, 4 years. It's pretty amazing, and I know Michigan fans are just reveling in it because they've got the new facilities, they've got the recruiting up to speed, and they've got the teams that are doing what they had hoped to do all along, is take those long NCAA runs.
Well, of course, John, the downside to this kind of success in the draft, losing players early, is that this year's team is going to be rebuilding, 6 freshmen on the roster. But it sounds like when you listen to Coach Beilein, he's really looking forward to the challenge of putting these pieces together, isn't he?
No, there's no doubt about it. The guy's a teacher. I mean, I've sat in his office, and he has a specially made table with little checkers on it. He moves around, and the man loves to put together a team and make all the parts work. And don't let anybody fool you. He has parts. They're extremely young, but they have some people coming back who are going to be really dynamic. You've got Karis LeVert back, and you've got your Zach Irvin, Derek Walton. These are pieces to build around who have now been through it, and certainly you can put some pieces in place. You mentioned the 6 freshmen on the roster. You've got big men like a Ricky Doyle and others that have been redshirted, and Cameron Chapman. He's another freshman who is going to, I think, come in and really make an impact. So it will be a year where you have to look at it and say, okay, it may not be happening here early on, and it may not have as high a ceiling as it did last year. But in the end, by late February, I think this team is going to be very fun to watch, and it's, again, going to build those hopes for even March next year, and for the future.
Well, John, I know this is a way too early question, but do you see this team, even though they are very young, very talented, as you said, having a chance to compete with the upper level of the Big Ten and have a chance, I should say, at an NCAA tournament berth in March?
I would be disappointed if both of those didn't come about. I really would, because you look at the Big Ten, and other programs have taken a pretty good hit as well, from the Ohio States to Michigan State, losing a couple of first-rounders in that draft. And, you look at Wisconsin, that has pretty much its roster back intact, and I think that is they're going to be really the team to beat in the Big Ten. But beyond them, tell me who Michigan can't compete with, and I can't come up with any answers there, because I think that they'll be right there in the hunt in the top half of the league, and that will get you into the NCAA tournament. From there, where you go, it's a bit of a crapshoot, because on any given day, as we all know, in the NCAA tournament, things can happen, and if the dominoes fall right, you can maybe make a little bit of a run. I would say you can't count on that. Certainly in a year that's you're kind of restocking, but I think this team is battling for the Big Ten championship again and making the NCAA tournament.
Well, that would be amazing, battling for the Big Ten championship. I think most Michigan fans, as you mentioned at the top, were reveling in the last few years. It's just been an incredible run. And it's a young team, but the last two drafts have kept Michigan, I think, in the media forefront, especially on draft day, in the minds of a lot of the young players out there. And that could very well pay big dividends in recruiting the next few years too, couldn't it?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. I mean, Michigan they're in on a higher class, higher group of players, and you just look at the people that they're in on now. We're talking top 100 players. We're not talking about trying to, as Zach Novak once jokingly and self-deprecatingly say, they're not pulling us out of the local Y anymore. And he was talking about himself and Stu Douglas, which those guys were really a culture-changing element to this program, and but now you're looking at players that all the big boys are after, and it makes a huge difference. You do win with a program, but you win with top talent, and Michigan has proven to people there's no recruit that's looking at Michigan anymore and saying, well, yeah, tradition and facilities, but I don't have any guarantee of winning there. And
absolutely,
you have an answer to that now.
Well, it's going to be a season to look forward to, and I know Wolverine fans are already doing that. My guest today is the editor of the Wolverine Magazine, John Borton. John, let's switch gears, talk some Michigan football if we could. Some of the things we've been hearing during this quiet period, or a story that we've been hearing a lot about, John, is student ticket sales way down for the coming season. I don't think we know exactly. Well, I haven't seen a final number yet. A lot of discussion on that topic during the off season. What do you think has to be done to re-engage the student body?
Number 1, number 2, and number 3 on the list: win more football games. Yeah. Winning creates demand. We can have all kinds of discussions about, they've changed things, so I'm not guaranteed to get to sit with my friends. It's a first come, first serve. I don't have my traditional spot given, my class. The noon starts are too early. You can say all of that. Win at a high level. And when you do that, people want to be there. And whether it's students, whether it's folks that used to be on the waiting list wanting to get in, whoever it might be, if you're getting back to the late 90s types of seasons, to 2003, 2004, 2006, when you have a product on the field where people know it's going to be at a really high level, they're going to come. And I think that's the bottom line.
So you don't think the change in student ticket policy the last couple of years has been the main driving force there as far as first come, first serve, what Brandon did to change things? It's just winning.
I don't think that's the main thing. I think that can affect it. I think that's one more thing that people can talk about if you're not satisfied anyway. But I think that the driving force has been 8-5 and 7-6. I really do. I mean, and that goes from season ticket renewals to students to anybody. I mean, it's already a situation where the price is, you're paying a price. Not so much for students, but certainly for the season ticket holders, and they're making decisions now. Okay, what am I paying for, and can I continue to do this? And bottom line is, they're used to a Michigan football experience that was built up over 35, 40 years, where you're doing exactly what Brady Hoke aims to do and talks about as competing for Big Ten championships every year. Well, you haven't seen that, and I think there are reasons for it. I think 2 years ago you'd have been competing for, if not winning, the Big Ten championship if Denard Robinson doesn't take the 1 in a million shot to the elbow that puts him out in the latter half of that season. But that said, last year was obviously a step back and a big disappointment.
Well, John, we're just a few weeks away from the start of fall practice. The preseason magazines are on the stands, are coming out. Everyone's undefeated right now. Expectations for Michigan fans are always high this time of year. But, heading into this season, I get the feeling from fans I talk to that they just don't know, what to expect from Team 135. Is that sort of the vibe you get from fans, too?
Absolutely. It's a total Missouri show me. I'm not there yet because they'll pick up their preview magazines and they'll see Michigan finishing third in their division, much less the Big Ten, or fourth in the case of one publication. So and who's ahead of them? The Michigan's greatest rivals in the Big Ten, Ohio State and Michigan State. That grinds a little bit on your typical Michigan fan, and they know further that despite the number of weapons that Michigan's going to have, and there will be a few, starting from Devin Gardner to Devin Funchess to the excitement over Jabril Peppers on the defensive side of the ball, joining with a lot of returners and the talk of it's going to be a renewed, more aggressive scheme, more man coverage, all of that. Here's the big question mark, the elephant in the room, if you will, is what are they going to have up front on that offensive line? And is it going to be better such that you're not finishing in the 103rd in the nation in terms of rushing yardage per game, and you're not leading the nation in tackles for loss allowed? That was disastrous last year, and it has to change. And we saw change in that you've got Doug Nussmeier coming in, and it's widely talked about how he's simplifying schemes and making it so this team is going to get back to a rushing attack that is Michigan worthy. He says it, Brady Hoke says it, but we haven't seen it yet. So that is the greatest doubt, I think, in many people's minds, and legitimately so.
John, Brady Hoke had a great first year as head coach. We all know that. Past two seasons have been disappointing in many ways for a lot of reasons. Do you think this team needs to show big improvement in Brady's fourth year, or is next year really going to be the make it or break it year for him in his program?
Oh, I think they need to show some nice progress this year. Yeah, I think this is a team that you'd like to see win 9 games at least, and do some things differently, not give away games. The close ones, pull those out, make the plays to win them, than to see them just slip away like there were close games last year. Not allow the Akrons and the UConns of the world to hang with you. In other words, mature and take a good step forward. I think in those 3 seasons you talk about, there was one that just came out of the blue and blew everybody away with 11-2 and Sugar Bowl championship. The next year, I truly believe Michigan, as Big Ten champions, had the injury to Denard Robinson not occurred. And that was just a ridiculous schedule, starting with Alabama down there in Jerry World, and it was the road game schedule where you've got all the tough games on the road, just like this one. Last year they were set up for something better, but something just wasn't right, and part of that was people talk about chemistry. I think that's exacerbated when you start to lose. But even in Brady Hoke admitted there were a few things that weren't quite right in terms of leadership on that team, and we'll get right back to that offensive line that you've got to get straightened out, and you've got to see the offense be a bigger part of the whole in moving this thing forward. So 3 years and 2 disappointments. I think that second one was again due to injury, but you need to show some really good solid progress this year and just give an assurance that things are maturing and heading in the way that you think that they can if you're Dave Brandon.
And, I'm not making an excuse for Coach Hoke, but you've just put together the preseason magazine, so you know this roster inside and out. and that it's blessed with talent. There's no question about that. But in all of the years you've covered Michigan football, John, have you ever seen a roster so heavily populated with freshmen and sophomores?
No, there are a ton of them, and the response, the knee-jerk response to that from your typical Michigan fan will say, "I'm tired of hearing about youth. Don't tell me about youth. I don't want to hear about it. You can't always be young." Well, you can when you've gone through a second transition. You had a lot of seniors that first year, and then you had to build back in the younger offensive linemen, and then they take a while to bring along. And they are building. They've got a dozen seniors, something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fact, and that doesn't mean you don't try to speed up the process and ramp things up and put a lot of pressure on to mature quicker. But they are young, and despite that, they've got talent. They can do some things. They've got a fifth-year senior quarterback, but I think people have to understand that it's not so much of an excuse as it is a reality, and you really have to work overtime to get over the top there.
Well, final question, John. Let me get your way too early guess on the upcoming season. Do you think this is going to be the year, Coach Hoke's fourth year, that Michigan turns the corner, begins to climb back to be considered one of college football and the Big Ten's elite programs?
I'm not sure that they make the jump to everyone saying they're elite again yet, but I think you have to reestablish, okay, this is solid, this is going in the right direction. And I think a 9-3 regular season finish is very reasonable along those lines, especially when you consider you are going to Notre Dame, you're going to Michigan State, you're going to Columbus to play Ohio State at the end of the season. I think they really need to win one of those games, and preferably one of the Big Ten games, one of the division games against a Michigan State or against an Ohio State. I mean, they've been within a play 2 years in a row of beating Ohio State, but they haven't made that play. They need to make that play. Michigan State's been a different deal altogether. They've really gotten punched in the nose by the Spartans, and they have to start to show, okay, we know what's coming. This is a physical war, and we have to be able to meet that challenge. You have to see signs there. But as far as I'm concerned, I think this could very well be a 9-3 Michigan team. And if it plays out the right way with some of the elements that I'm talking about, I think people then draw from that. Okay, yeah, this is headed in a very sound direction, and with the parts that are now being put in place. Because remember, this program, this team, this coaching staff is recruiting at an extremely high level. All those things falling into place, then I think there's good hope for the future that you're going to be doing what this program should be doing, which should be competing every year for the Big Ten Championship.
Well, my guest on today's program has been the editor of our Michigan Bible, the Wolverine Magazine, John Borton. John, it's always a pleasure, and I look forward to having you back again in just a few short weeks, probably, when the season gets underway. So enjoy what little time you have left this summer, and we look forward to having you back soon.
I sure will. Appreciate being able to come on, and thank you very much.
Thanks again to the editor of the Wolverine Magazine, our Michigan Bible, John Borton, for being our guest on this week's show. Most of the watch lists for this year's college football season came out on Monday, so we'll take a look at that next on Wolverine Quick Hits as we wrap it up for another week on the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue, Michigan Wolverine. On Wolverine Quick Hits, University of Michigan defensive end Frank Clark and linebacker Jake Ryan were included on the 2014 Chuck Bednarik Award watch list, which was released on Monday. The Bednarik Award has been presented to the College Defensive Player of the Year since 1995. Clark was a second-team All-Big Ten selection last season. He started all 13 games of his junior campaign and recorded 43 tackles, including 12 for loss, with 4.5 sacks and 2 fumble recoveries. His tackles for loss total ranked 11th in the Big Ten, and his sacks total tied for 16th in the conference. He registered a single-game career-high 9 tackles at Michigan State and tied his career high with 2.5 tackles for loss at Iowa. In his career, Clark has accumulated 78 tackles, including 21.5 for loss, with 6.5 sacks, 3 fumble recoveries, 1 forced fumble, 1 interception, and 7 pass breakups. Ryan served as a team captain last season and registered 30 tackles, including 4.5 for loss, over the final 8 games after recovering from an injury that occurred during spring practice. In 2012, he was a second-team All-Big Ten performer when he led the team with 88 tackles, including 16 for loss, with 4.5 sacks, and tied the Michigan single-season record with 4 forced fumbles. In his career, Ryan has registered 155 tackles, including 31.5 for loss, with 7.5 sacks, 5 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries, and 4 pass breakups. He has recorded at least 1 tackle for loss in 25 of his last 30 games. Clark and Ryan are 2 of 10 from the Big Ten on the watch list, and Michigan is one of 3 schools in the conference with multiple representatives on the list. In other watch list news, wide receiver Devin Funchess and quarterback Devin Gardner were included on the 2014 Maxwell Award watch list, again released on Monday. The Maxwell Award has been given to America's College Player of the Year since 1937. Funchess moves to wide receiver in 2014 after appearing in the first 26 games of his career at tight end. Last season, he was named the Big Ten Qualic Clark Tight End of the Year and a semi-finalist for the John Mackey Award, in addition to earning first-team All-Big Ten after hauling in 49 catches for 748 yards and 6 TDs. His receiving yards were the highest single-season total by a U of M tight end in program history. In his career, Funchess has 64 receptions for 982 yards and 11 TDs. He enters the 2014 season having caught at least 1 pass in 14 straight games. Gardner earned all Big Ten honorable mention last season after accounting for 32 touchdowns and more than 3,000 all-purpose yards. He broke U of M's single-game records for passing yards and total offense yards by piling up 503 and 584, respectively, in the 63-47 victory over Indiana. He finished the season 208 of 345 passing for 2,960 yards, the second-highest single-season total in U of M history, and rushed 165 times for 483 yards and 11 scores. In his career, Gardner, who has graduated with a bachelor's degree in Afro-American and American Studies and is currently enrolled in the Master of Social Work program, is 301 of 504 passing for 4,440 yards and 34 TDs. He also has rushed for 658 yards and 20 touchdowns on 244 carries and caught 17 passes for 268 yards and 4 scores. Funchess and Gardner are 2 of 10 from the Big Ten on the watch list, and Michigan's 2 selections are tied for the most of any Big Ten school. We know you're enjoying summer and don't want it to end, but for many of us, summer will officially end on Labor Day when Appalachian State pays a visit to the Big House. It's not that far away, and here at GBM Wolverine, we're getting ready now. If you're not a member, visit www.gbmwolverine.com and sign up today. Best part is, it's free. You'll get email alerts when a story is published, have access to our always buzzing message board, and always get the latest Wolverine news. Whether it's looking ahead to this football season or even further ahead to another exciting basketball season, we've got it covered every day. So visit www.gbmwolverine.com and become a member today. Don't find yourself out of the Wolverine loop this summer and fall. If you're new to the show, welcome. There are so many ways you can listen to the program now, so it's never been easier to subscribe. First, if you listen on your laptop or your desktop, just go to the iTunes Store and sign up for free delivery. If you're mobile, you can find our app in the iTunes Store, the Android App Store at Amazon.com, and the Windows 8 App Store. You can also find us on Stitcher Radio, TuneIn Radio, and even YouTube. So subscribe to the show or get your app now. We resume weekly programming again in August, and you guessed it, we'll be previewing Michigan and Big Ten football the entire month. I also invite you to follow me on Twitter at The Michigan Man and like us on Facebook at The Michigan Man Podcast. Thanks again to John Borton for being my guest this week. John is the editor of the Wolverine Magazine. To subscribe, call 800-421-7751. That's 800-421-7751. Or visit www.thewolverineondemand.com. I will have both the link and the phone number in my show notes too. As you heard John mention, the football preview is due out in the next few weeks. If you've never seen the Wolverine Preview magazine, you have to subscribe this year. It alone, I guarantee you this, is worth the subscription price. I look forward to having John back on the show once the season gets underway. So thanks again, John. Our next show will publish on July 23rd. We're hoping to get Shemi Schembeckler on as our guest and get his thoughts on Team 135 and just talk college football in general. Shemi is always a great guest, so hopefully we'll have him with us on our last July show. Once August gets here, it's back to our weekly schedule as we get ramped up for the App State game and the start of the season. So I hope you'll mark July 23rd on your calendar and join us again. That will do it for this week. Enjoy your summer, Wolverine Nation. Football season will be here before we know it. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Take care, and as always, go Blue. Thanks for listening to the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. You can find us on the web at www.gbmwolverine.com. That's www.gbmwolverine.com. For audio posts or other fan feedback, please call our listener line at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Email fan feedback to the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. That's the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan. The Michigan Man Podcast is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue.